Greetings, all of you wonderful people of the World Economic Forum Caribbean. We are really excited to be here today to share these thoughts, these ideas. And what we're going to touch on is a panel around institutions that support entrepreneurship in the Caribbean. All of this wonderful panel here, we are all part of organizations that has done and continues to do work in growing entrepreneurs and innovation in the region. So what we're going to do during this discussion is talk about what the region needs, what's working, what's not, and just try to contribute to the conversation of how we can drive that forward. So before we jump into this, let's do some introductions of all of these wonderful people. We're going to kick the microphone to Katarina first to unmute and say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Hola. My name is Katarina Sanchez, and I work at Grupo Huedecan. I'm the program director, and I'm happy to be here with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katarina. Tricia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me, and welcome to everyone that's joining us. My name is Tricia Beckles, and I am from the country of Trinidad and Tobago, 2 islands. I work with the smaller island, the Tobago House of Assembly, where I manage the business development, strategic business support and development unit that is directly involved in getting our small and medium enterprises up to scratch and getting them ready for successfully competing on external markets, on export markets. Thanks again.
Excellent. Wonderful. And Rafael, please.
Hi, great to be here. I'm Rafael Lorenzo from University Tecnológico de Monterrey. I'm Director of Entrepreneurship Ecosystem at the Entrepreneurship Institute, Eugenio Garza La Guerra. I'm happy to share with you the things we have learned in the last years about promoting entrepreneurs.
This is wonderful. We've got a good mix of private and public government educational groups. To introduce myself very briefly, my name is Cam Hauser. I am on the faculty of the University of Texas, but I just do that because it helps me when I'm working with foreign governments. My primary work is teaching entrepreneurs how to use video. Being on camera is just a part of what it means to be alive in this day and age, and it allows us to transcend borders. So I run a course called Minimum Viable Video that helps entrepreneurs learn how to use video to grow their businesses, to learn from customers. So again, we've got a good mix of folks here. We've got a list of questions that we've been set up with, but I wanted to, before we dive into those, hit a much broader question from all the panelists about if you could tell us the region you're in and what you think that entrepreneurs need, what they need to be successful and keep that going. We'll go in reverse order from the introductions. So Rafael, if you would be so kind as to answer that question, what region are you in and what do entrepreneurs need there?
I am in Mexico, and some say it's the North America, some say this is Central America, but this is Latin and the Caribbean. So we think that what is happening in the region. It's amazing the last few years ago. And of course, the topic of entrepreneurship and promoting entrepreneurs and startups and small businesses were in the agenda for so many decades. But recently we have seen an inflow of investments and new startups, new technologies, new innovations in many different sectors. Just to mention one, fintech is one of these growing sectors in the region, and obviously the topic of financial inclusion is there as well. So I think that for some segment of entrepreneurs, it's been a very dynamic years. The last 5 years, 3 years has been very full of opportunities, and also the opportunities that come from the problems and the challenges we have as a region. So I think that without doubt, entrepreneurship is going to be one of the tools for development.
Excellent. And Tricia, would you like to answer for the same question?
Sure. I am in Trinidad and Tobago, which is one of the Caribbean islands, the islands in the Caribbean. So in a sense, and like World Bank reporting and stuff, we would be listed with Latin America and the Caribbean. But if I speak more specifically to the Caribbean, where the economies are smaller, the topic of entrepreneurship has been in the public space for a number of years. I would say probably close to 10 years or more, as you recognize the need for diversification of a lot of the economies which are tourism based. So you recognize the role it can play in not only diversifying the economy, but in providing opportunities that, coming with the recessions that have taken place, were presenting challenges for the small person, or even with COVID and everything else. I think increasingly within the last maybe 4 or 5 years, some more effort has gone into it. One of the challenges in seeing it come to the kind of completion you want to see is probably the issue of bureaucracy. But if you ask the specific question of what do entrepreneurs need, cash flows may seem to be obvious, but I think that also has to be structured with the kind of training and support that would help them to be comfortable as business persons and knowing that cash is not everything. So you have to have access to opportunities, access to markets, and the necessary infrastructures to ensure that they're able to take advantage of the markets that are available to them.
Thank you, Tricia. And real quick, do you all have training programs that you are satisfied with in Trinidad and Tobago, or are they still developing?
I would say they're developing. In my role in the Tobago House of Assembly, I have had to, since I've started there maybe about 10 years ago, I have designed entrepreneurship curricula for our entrepreneurs to be able to get different types of training. So some have become standard with the Assembly to access training. And then beyond that, even as we are more focused on getting some into the export markets, we've had to tailor some programs to ensure that they're able to access these markets. They're able not just to go to see what is taking place, but to be able to enter the conversation with a level of knowledge and confidence as to what they bring to the table and the value of it. Finally, with the advent of COVID-19, we've actually lost some of our more promising entrepreneurs to the disease, and it helps us to emphasize the need for succession planning, succession training. That is not something that you hear a whole lot about, so it's something I've been trying to push for the last few years, but I think it would take on increased importance with what is happening with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Excellent. I do this all over the world. I've seen very little in the way of succession planning in terms of entrepreneurs that's been done well at all. To your point about the confidence to do this, I'm going to pause that because that's a really rich topic, and I want us to loop back around to that because we're going to talk about that forever. There's just a lot of great stories to tell about entrepreneurial confidence and how that can translate to things. Let's pass the mic to Katerina. If you could answer that question about what region are you in, and what, in your estimation, what do the entrepreneurs need?
So Grupo Huayacán operates in Puerto Rico, and we have the pleasure of impacting entrepreneurs all over the island. Mainly, we have noticed, the first need of all entrepreneurs is cash, is money. Everyone says, oh, I need capital. But what we've noticed in Grupo Huayacán is that entrepreneurs need capital after their startup stage. So they've already gone through several entrepreneurial programs, competitions, they have some seed capital, but they don't have that money, that $100,000, that $250K to get their business to the next level for them to be an actual business. So we've noticed that access in capital in different stages is a huge need. Also, employees have been a huge issue during the pandemic. We have companies from all stages, all industries looking for people from all salary wages. It's ridiculous. We really need people for these jobs.
That's so interesting. We're seeing that everywhere. Hiring shortages across all industries in so many different places and in so many different cultures. In the US, of course, we've had the great resignation, which is that so many people don't want to come back to work. And that's a whole other thing. But thank you all for sharing that. So we're getting, again, different perspectives from different ecosystems at different levels. Why don't we actually can jump into the money question, because it sounds like that's a few things that you all are all touching on, is the importance of having capital at early stages. One of the things that is so thrilling about growth of the internet and all these different tools we have tied with the internet is that it's much easier to validate an idea. So in many cases, decades ago, you might need to buy a storefront or might need to take out a lease on a storefront, on a retail storefront, to test if people want your product or not. But now, of course, we have online service to do that. So I'd love to hear you all's take on, and Trisha, I'm going to go to you first, so I'll frame the question just to let you know that the question is coming your way. I'd love your take on, again, is access to capital there? You already touched on saying that, hey, capital readiness, the idea that these founders, if they get that money, they might not know what to do with it. But how much of a speed bump is that? How much is the lack of capital slowing your entrepreneurs down?
I think it's a bit of a balance between the two, because the benefit that we have, or the bonus that we have here, is that you have a number of entities that want to invest. But they come from the approach that is adopted, whether it's the banks, probably alternate source of investments, where they come from, the financials play a significant role, and understandably so. And as such, in them seeking to invest or to provide the support, it takes a little while for the businesses to provide necessary financials, business plans, that type of thing. So it tends to slow it a whole lot. Even in one of our sister organizations, which is seen as the main one for providing financial support, applications can take sometimes months for persons to access cash, to access capital for what they want to do. And the major point in that is the lack of financials and the kind of understanding as to, having that conversation that the bankers would understand and you would be comfortable in sharing. Sometimes too, with smaller entrepreneurs, there's also the issue of level of mistrust, where they don't want to give you the clear picture. So they tell you exactly what they think you might need to hear, and you have to be able to discern between the two. So while that conversation is taking place, the needs of the business go lacking. And I think it's always an interesting conversation. I think as well, and I'm glad Katerina raised it, the timing of the cash flows becomes incredibly critical, especially given how dynamic everything is, given our COVID reality. And I find it so interesting to hear you talking about hiring shortages, because here we actually have our entrepreneurs that are approaching it by trying to keep their staff, just so that they can have some means of income, some means of support. And they are sometimes asking for cash flows to be able to pay staff and keep staff. Kind of similar to the PPP program, I think, in the United States. Mm-hmm. We don't have it like that here. So It's always an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Okay. That is some great points from Trisha. She's hitting on something so powerful, right? Which is when we talk about money, funding, capital for startups, we have to talk about it. And as groups that support entrepreneurs, we are very often the bridge between the money and the entrepreneurs, the people who have that money. And these groups don't always like talking to you. As Trisha stated, assembling your financials, entrepreneurs are rightfully so obsessed with serving customers. They don't want to go back 9 months and find all this data when, in bankier language, that's exactly what you need to raise this capital. So again, it's our job to help broker those conversations, and we understand that those don't always happen as directly as we would like, but nonetheless, they matter a great deal. Raphael, let's hit you real quick. If you would, we'd like to hear the question of, again, in your region about access to capital, how much of a challenge is it? And I think Katerina and Trisha did excellent jobs of painting the picture of what conversations are happening around that topic. We'd love to hear what the conversations are like in Monterrey.
Yeah, in Mexico in general, I would say that for sure the pandemic hit hard to sources of funding for many entrepreneurs. In some senses, there were the support from the official sources were scarce in that sense. But on the other hand, in another segment of more high growth, high impact entrepreneurs, has been a flowing of funding as well. But I would say that yes, the funding has been always a challenge. I mean, for many decades in the different segments of entrepreneurs. But I would like to also emphasize that next, besides to the funding, we need to have more financial education for entrepreneurs. Not only on the basics like cash flow or many like traditional financial statements, but also to understand concepts like unit economics. If at some point in their venture they are able to make a profit, because many of the initial ideas are like that, and when they start validating, they don't they serve the market like you, as you said, Cam. But what about the unit economics? How the unit economics is being evolving and validating that if the venture can be profitable at some point, and then you can break even at some point, even without funding coming from a grant or a soft loan or a loan or some investments, because of course many of entrepreneurs finance themselves with friends, family, and fools, in some sense. And so understanding this unit economics, the cost of customer acquisition, all these financials that cash flow. I think we need more education, financial education, entrepreneurial finance, also besides the funding sources available to them.
We definitely have seen everywhere I've worked, and honestly, the entirety of North America, but especially the Caribbean and South America as well, lack of education around there. Basically, what I want is the same sort of capital we deploy to training athletes, soccer players at the development at leagues at very early ages. I want that for people learning unit economics and that sort of thing. So I would be rude if I did not pay more attention to the questions that are on the list. So I do want to pose a question to all you folks there's a question about good private sector interaction or good industries, private sector that is supporting entrepreneurship in your regions. This is an opportunity to brag about the wonderful companies that are supporting entrepreneurship and the founders in your regions. It's also an opportunity to complain and tell us why it's not working, in hopes that maybe the rest of us can offer guidance and advice to support that. We'll go in reverse order. So Katerina, let's go to you first. Could you talk to us about how the private sector engages entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I didn't answer the last question, but do you want me to answer this question first?
Just freestyle it. We believe in you.
Okay, I want to talk about the last question though, because in Puerto Rico, I'm really happy to say that we have a robust ecosystem. So we have a lot of competitions, a lot of accelerators that give, grants and awards to entrepreneurs, but then they have their idea, they go through all these programs, they have a little bit of cash, they set up their company, and then when they're really going strong and they have clients and they have sales, they don't have that capital to really establish the business. So access to capital in all levels is really important, and they can't go to a bank because they don't have the traction they need or the years of experience. So the other question was the ecosystem and the private sector?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, feel free to expand on it. You can talk private sector, but we'd love to hear just question number 2 touches on the big elements in the ecosystem. We'd love to hear your take on the big pieces of the ecosystem in Puerto Rico that are, again, performing great, or ones that are still figuring out and growing in their ability to support entrepreneurs.
So in Puerto Rico, a lot of private sector, huge companies are supporting entrepreneurs, which is great, and the government as well. So we've seen that rise and that priority in supporting entrepreneurs across the board in the different sectors. Obviously, there's always, areas of opportunity. Some companies could help more and provide more to startups, but I think that the private sector has really gone ways beyond, at least in our ecosystem. I know that the entrepreneurs still struggle with just the process, the permits, and all of those things is very complex, and it takes such a long time. I know someone that has been 2 years trying to just establish their factory, and they're ready to make the bread, but they need just the permits. Mm-hmm. So, that's a long time where an entrepreneur is selling under the table and they have a deal with a supermarket, but they just don't have, the health permit to sell it officially. So, we have to align all of those ducks. We have to make it easier for the entrepreneur to do their job in order to create employment, in order to put money back into the economy.
Right. Again, the notion that entrepreneurs are creators and builders. What they're not often the most talented at is filling out forms for multiple months straight, that if they get one piece of that form wrong, they have to start all over. Tricia, would love to hear your take on that. How does the private sector, if they support your entrepreneurship ecosystem, how does that work? And also, if you could just tell us some of the different elements of the ecosystem in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, directly to the private sector, I think it could be a whole lot better. But I know that a lot of the support has come through the chambers of commerce and like the associations. So we have the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, that they have been very instrumental in not only bringing entities under their umbrella, but they've also been very loud in terms of petitioning the government for concessions and everything else, even coming out of the COVID restrictions and everything else. So mainly through the chambers and the manufacturing associations, you hardly find a lot of persons, a lot of private entities directly and publicly getting involved with firms. When you talk to maybe owners and CEOs, they may tell you, well, okay, I invested in one SME, I invested in this company, I invested in that. But it's never a public thing like you would have maybe you don't have a whole lot of startup competitions. You don't have those kinds of events taking place on any regular basis. The issue with some of the chambers, of course, membership comes at a price, comes at a cost. And not all the time, the SMEs may have the ability to pay it on a regular basis. And there's some level of distrust at some times. So it helps to make the role of entities like mine, the Tobago House of Assembly, to really be that intermediary where we can either listen to each group and bring the information together and kind of see how best we can help. I think one of the main things that is needed in Trinidad and Tobago is that whole issue of mentorship. And so while we in the Tobago House of Assembly will do a whole lot in terms of trying to do the hand-holding and providing the information, providing the opportunities, I think a mentorship model will be a lot more helpful. We have explored a few of those. We haven't put anything formal in place yet, so it's really a lot of the mentorship that is taking place is kind of informal. I also wanted to make the point of, in terms of your definitions of the size of what classifies as SME, what classifies as MSME, because some of the support that was tailored to SMEs as being defined over a certain revenue threshold, that when the incentives are offered, the regular MSME that you're trying to develop over the years was still unable to access it. So I mentioned bureaucracy earlier, but I think we kind of need to be a little bit more mindful of the needs for it. And one more thing is the issue of time. I think you mentioned it, Cam, when you spoke about expecting an entrepreneur, an SME, to just sit and be able to do financials all the time instead of actually making a product, which is a huge thing. I mean, in our unit, in our division, we've actually hired persons to work with MSMEs with their financials and educating them along those lines. And it's still presented challenges in terms of time and continuous engagement. So it really is an ongoing conversation, and I'm also glad that Katerina raised the whole issue of the factory, because that's one of the current initiatives we are having to work on, where persons are having opportunities even beyond the Trinidad and Tobago, even beyond the region, but in terms of getting HACCP certifications and those types of certifications, it's a challenge because a lot of the entities are setting up little factory spaces outside of their homes or on the side in a room in their home, which automatically disqualifies you from having HACCP and similar type certifications.
Yeah, that's the story. That sort of thing is happening all the time. Those are all wonderful points. And I think both Katarina's and Trish's insights, they're a reminder that these private sector, as much as they want to support startups, which is wonderful when they do, because many times they don't, but when they do, because they're not entrepreneurs themselves, they think that a startup or that an entrepreneur who's just starting out is just like a small version of a big company. And they're not at all. They're solving entirely different problems. It's much more chaotic and disorganized and much more unpredictable. A lot of them think, well, we're happy to support these organizations. When can you give us the the P&L statement? And the entrepreneurs think, P&L statement? Like, we need to make sure we can even do this in the first place. So, no, I hear you completely. Rafael, would love to hear your take on that and your take on, again, I know that Monterey Tech and just the Monterey region in general is very impressive. The amount of output from that region, it's been punching above its weight for a very, very long time. So would love to hear your take if it's similar to what Katarina and Trisha talked about, or if you've seen something different in your region.
Yeah, I would say, again, I would say about the Monterey region and also Mexico. I would say that it's very, what we have seen in the last years about the ecosystem development. I think it's amazing in the sense that we now have many actors playing very actively here. Also, we have accelerators, national ones and from other countries as well. And we also have venture capital firms. And we have also have some investments from venture capitalists from outside Mexico, especially from the US and Latin America and Europe as well. So I think in that sense, we have seen in the beginning of this ecosystem development, a big role for the national government, the federal government in promoting the ecosystem and promoting entrepreneurs. But now we have also seen local governments getting into the game and trying to support, and then, seeing themselves as cities that can attract talent and they can attract investments and they can attract entrepreneurs, like the case of Monterrey or Guadalajara. Mexico City is the big center in terms of entrepreneurial venture creation and all these actors.
Rafael, could you tell us how, on the local level, how that happens? You said that, again, some of these could you talk to us about that?
Yeah. For instance, Guadalajara, which is in the west part, more close to the Pacific Ocean. We have seen this startup community and also some startups that are not any longer startups, a little more bigger companies, that they are like evangelists of the city, and the city and the state of Jalisco trying to attract this talent. Also in the Monterrey region, we, for instance, here at our main campus, probably you know that we are multi-campus system in 26 cities in Mexico, but in Monterrey, which is the big one, we are developing a innovation district in order to attract not only entrepreneurs and innovators, but also corporations, in a kind of hub and local ecosystem, very, very, very localized around the campus. So that is the other thing that is happening regarding the private sector involvement in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And we have seen, I think in the first was curiosity about corporations, or what's going on with startups, especially from the financial institutions, but also retailing. And what is this thing about being disrupted, And they of course they saw all these big startups from Silicon Valley and say, we want to know more. But now their involvement is been growing, and even we have, of course, corporations playing a big role in open innovation, searching for innovations in the startups and searching for talent in the startups. We have also seen that they are even going beyond that. And actually, right now we have a program with a big corporation, a program with the corporation that it goes from community development, ideation, to incubation, to acceleration of projects related to sustainability. For instance, this year we have sustainable agriculture, we have CO2 mitigation, we have access to water, and this is more like the social responsibility part of this big corporation, but they are having an impact on this ecosystem, in particular this vertical of sustainability. So they are very interested in supporting the community and the entrepreneurs researchers, innovators in the area of sustainability. So I think it's the corporations and big companies are starting to understand a little bit the dynamic of the entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship world and entrepreneurs.
Exactly. And I think that there is this rising tide that lift all ships notion that if entrepreneurship is happening in a city, it does tend to be good for the corporate players in there as well for a number of reasons. So I certainly agree with that. One of the ecosystems that I admire the most is Boston, Massachusetts figured out how to get corporations to mentor startups, and they made them pay for the privilege of doing that. So these wealthy corporations in Boston, they give advice to entrepreneurs, and I'm sure some of them had good advice. I'm sure some of their advice was terrible. But what's important is that these corporations were donating money to the entrepreneurship institutions there that, of course, was being passed through to the founders. And I really like that. I've tried to pull that off in several regions, including the Caribbean, and I have not pulled it off there. So where I want to take us next is at one point we're going to get into...
Wait.
Yes.
Cam, so sorry. Now that you said that, I'm remiss to say we have a competition in Grupo Guayacan, and we have corporates that pay, awards, and they sponsor us, and they give also. So in Puerto Rico, we have that too. Corporates are giving back to the community and to the entrepreneurs, and sometimes they even give extra time to our entrepreneurs. So I just wanted to say that.
That's beautiful. And again, those corporates, they can be great pilot customers for LAP. So there's a lot of benefits there. But in the last 10 years, it's been wonderful to see entrepreneurship and startups become cool. And the cooler they get, the more corporate money can support founders, which is what I really care about.
Can I ask a question, Cam?
Please.
Do you think that coming together between startups and larger producers or larger businesses, do you think that should be facilitated or in any way by the government, or should that be a natural strengthening mechanism that everybody recognizes the worth of it and pushes it on their own? Should it be government mandated?
I'm wary of mandating anything. But as far as the involvement of government, I think that depends on the administration. I do a lot of work with innovation arms of governments, and they're very much a function of the people within them. Some of them are open-minded, they listen, they understand that the startups can teach them things. There are others who come from a government background where the higher you up in the hierarchy, the more right you are, and that's all there is to it. And so my answer is I usually recommend that you proceed slowly and cautiously with those sorts of things, which usually you don't have to ask the governments to proceed slowly. So usually that happens on its own, but just to figure out how that works. But if they can, it's nice. The one thing I have seen is that governments, and I support them when they do this, is that they will broker a relationship between a corporation and a startup. And if something good happens, the government will talk about it forever. They'll say, remember that time we connected these two groups? And that's good. That is a wonderful thing, because that means that they're seeing the value of creating those good connections. And I support that whenever possible. Yeah. And I'm loving these questions. So please continue to interrupt and ask questions for any of y'all. One of the topics we're going to hit is entrepreneurial mindsets and feelings about failure and how we as supporters of entrepreneurship can go there. But Katerina and Trisha both brought up mentorship. And again, these are things that they function great in some ecosystems, not in others. I would love to hear from the panel your thoughts on what good mentorship is, if there's any programs you'd like to highlight, if there's any advice that for the people who mentor startups who are watching this, you'd like to offer. This would be a great time to share that. So just general thoughts on mentorship, and we'll go in reverse order. So Rafael, we'll kick it back to you.
Okay.
Take it away.
Yeah, I think mentorship it's in some senses like capital, in the sense that you need entrepreneurs and people who are have gone all the way and to give back, and to inspire the new generation of entrepreneurs, but also to guide them. And I think that we have been learning. I mean, mentorship is not like, at least in Mexico, it was not like a cultural thing. That's something that you can find in the more developed ecosystems. So we have been learning. Actually, we have all of our programs have mentorship. in different degrees of involvement. But we have one which is it's completely mentor driven, and it's for small startups, small companies that have at least 2 years 2 years old of when founded. And we have seen the importance, of course, and not only up to the uh, venture level or to the business level, but also to the personal level. I think that, as you mentioned, of course, this road is full of failures and obstacles and challenges. And even here in Mexico, there were two entrepreneurs that founded this movement about failure. It's like I would say it's Fuck Up Nights. That Fuck Up Nights is now a global movement, and in which you speak candidly about how do you feel? I mean, how failure is, but more importantly, what were the main learnings? The learnings and the go and the action forward. So for sure, I think we still need to do more on learning and training on mentorship, and also, but I think it's critical.
That's a great point, and we can get into this if there's sufficient time. But what I'm finding interesting is seeing a lot of good success where you train the mentees how to use the mentors, in addition to training the mentors how to be good mentors. For a lot of organizations, mentor training is, don't harass the mentees, and that's it. And in fact, I think we need to train the entrepreneurs. How do you ask the right questions? But anyway, I'd love to hear more from y'all. Trisha, please talk us about mentorship in your region.
I'm not going to be very long with this because I'm looking at the time, but I really want to highlight not just the benefits of mentorship, because I think it is really needed. I mean, it's the people that are in the fight, have gone through the fight, have achieved some measure of success. They would have insights that you may not necessarily find in a textbook. You may not necessarily find from the perspective of the government or the government agencies. And I think one of the key things about mentorship, it also opens avenues for networking that the government agencies and others may not have access to, even in how you enter external markets. So I think it's needed in Trinidad and Tobago. Like I said, it happens mostly informally, but we are looking to bring something to the table. I think where we work, we have different levels of support financially. So we have a venture capital fund, we have different entities. But when mentorship is concerned, that is currently evolving, and we will get it going. We will do something.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things I've seen when organizations like yours are trying to implement these things is that pairing mentors with entrepreneurs is strange. In many ways, it's like matchmaking a dating relationship. And we all know how well those work. Maybe they work better in your region, but most of the places I work in, that's not a thing. So what I find is that a lot of times it's best to start them very informally and just see what happens.
And actually, some of those who are willing to mentor, they look to the government agencies to see how serious they are in what they're proposing in terms of support otherwise. And they determine then whether they are going to really engage the way we want them to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And another thing we've also seen is that even if your mentor training is terrible, there's still tremendous value in it, because what's happening is these mentors, they show you that someone from your region can do it. It's one thing to see Zuckerberg on TV, like, okay, great, the guy went to Harvard, he had doctor parents, whatever. But it's another thing to see someone who looks like you who did it. And so even if mentorship training is not fully situated, there's just power in that, the modeling factor. So that's fantastic. Katerina, you wanna share your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah. So mentorship programs is a challenge in and of itself. So what we identified in Grupo Guayacan was integrating it in the actual curriculum of the program. So in ICOR, which is a validating idea program, every team is matched with a mentor, and we've seen huge success with that. But that lives during the time, the 5 weeks of that program. And in our other programs, we've also, kind of included it, but in a very informal manner. So it has the stem from the mentor, because sometimes entrepreneurs are really pushy. I mean, sometimes no, they're really pushy and aggressive. So we need to set those boundaries. So our sponsors and our coaches are really into, supporting entrepreneurship in Puerto Rico. And they often, choose 3 or 4 entrepreneurs to mentor during the process of the competition. But something I do want to mention, although I think mentoring is really important, and I want to echo the words of Rafael and Trisha, that having serial entrepreneurs mentor new entrepreneurs is amazing, because they already know and they've gone through all those steps. Sometimes entrepreneurs confuse mentors with consultants, and they want like the mentor to do all the work. A mentor is someone that is a sounding board, that you ask questions, doubts. He's not going to do the work for you. I've heard mentors call me and be like, this kid asked me to go make sales calls for him. What? So that's been an issue as of late. But what we also noticed is that some entrepreneurs just need that 1 hour of technical assistance with this person that knows financials or marketing or sales. And that works really good. And we've done that virtually in the pandemic. And that's been very successful for our entrepreneurs in our programs. And when they graduate, we also try to help them out.
Let the record show that Katarina's entrepreneur who is trying to put their mentors to work is probably going to be a billionaire in 5 years. I'd like to give this entrepreneur a shout out saying respect. I think that's the mentor's job to tell them no, that they're not going to do that. I'm in support of that. And that's actually a great segue into the last thing we're going to talk before we sign off, which is this notion of the mindsets of entrepreneurs. Katarina's entrepreneur, clearly this person is already thinking about delegating things when they're just a very early stage entrepreneur. But this is definitely, when we talk about the Caribbean, that mindset there can be different than other places. And so I'd love just to share, and again, we're talking globally as well. I'd love just to hear, how are the entrepreneurs thinking in your community? Because we do find that very often this is one of the first things we need to hit. In some cultures, being an entrepreneur is you're an outcast. People think you're weird. You just can't get a real job. And in some cultures, it is something to be praised and rewarded, and you're automatically cool if you're going to start a company. But the wiring, your internal, your intrinsic mindset about what it means to start a company, a lot of times that's what needs the most help. So I'd love for you all to share with us, in your estimation, what are the mindsets of the entrepreneurs in your culture, and what do you do to help them grow and become more entrepreneurial in how they see the world? So again, we're going to swap up the order. So Katarina, that means we're coming back to you.
So the mindset of entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico. So in Puerto Rico, we have something that we call the entrepreneurial ecosystem bubble. So the entrepreneurs within our bubble are very resilient, are very pushy, and very goal-oriented. And, they go through anything, pandemics, hurricanes, they don't stop. Our entrepreneurs are great. And we do anything and everything in our power to support them with our programs, with access to capital, etc. So outside of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, outside of our beautiful bubble, there are micro entrepreneurs. There are entrepreneurs in every stage, of the game and all industries. They're very hardworking, but there's a divide within those entrepreneurs. So they call themselves, in Spanish, they say comerciante. They're commerce people. They're not entrepreneurs. So they're business people. They're not entrepreneurs. And there's a divide, and we're slowly but surely breaking that divide. And it's more of like an extended metro area in Puerto Rico and then the other part of the island. And that's a challenge that we've had. And we're working really hard to support entrepreneurs in all the island. And I think our organization and different organizations as well. But overall, the mindset of business people and entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico is don't stop, keep going, keep the doors open, and, continue to deliver value to your customers.
Interesting. Yeah, there's that notion of some entrepreneurs are born that way, and then there's others that we can make, and how do we make them? And that's wonderful. Trisha, would love to hear your take on, again, the entrepreneurial mindset in your region and the things that you do or that you recommend that people do to grow that in a region.
Yes, I think based on, and let me just say, I've been to Puerto Rico and I've visited Katarina's program with the ACE Exchange, and I think it was 2019. It's really a great program. In Trinidad and Tobago, generally, you have a lot of persons, like Katarina spoke about, they want to do it informally, where it's just about a means of making a second income. when we started our unit, the business development unit in the Tobago House Assembly, we had a number of those persons come forward and actually get assistance in buying equipment and everything else like that. But when you start working with them towards actually developing a product, to have it in the supermarket shelves, to have it external to Tobago, to Trinidad and Tobago, we recognize mentally the approach was, it's too much work. So it's very easy, it's very comfortable to just do my little thing where I could get some income when I need it, maybe for the month end or whatever the case is. And so in forming the unit that I'm working at now, that I'm managing now, the Strategic Business Support and Development Unit, we had to make that distinction. If you're serious, I just put it plain. If you're serious, we work with you. If you're not, okay, good. We know you have a good product, but I've had to learn from a personal level that I can only take you as far as you want to go. From the advent of the society and how they approach entrepreneurship, I think because of what has happened in the past, there's a hesitation. But for those now who are really gung-ho and going with you, just like in what Katerina spoke about, they are so very resilient, and it's something that I'm proud of. As you see them gain and you see them get access and take advantage of opportunities, it's really encouraging. And I think sometimes it's discouraging for us from the government level that we are not able to keep up with the type of support that they need in order to take that next step. So thankfully, I would say in Trinidad and Tobago, the entrepreneurial mindset is evolving to where it is a whole lot more acceptable, and you have an exponential increase in persons starting up business and looking for opportunities to take their businesses to the next level.
Well said. And it is interesting how ambition is really a great signal, because when you think about especially private sector involvement, a lot of times, and investors, they're not interested in funding a laundromat. They want to support businesses. They're going to build massively scalable products and services that can eventually, again, the big win here is to bring outside capital, customers, global customers to that region. And you don't always see that. I generally find that I have to look pretty hard for that in a lot of places and find that sort of thing. Raphael, would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because we can talk a lot about entrepreneurial mindset. But I would like to say that we can see it. For instance, we participate in this Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is a study survey of many countries. And then we can find the entrepreneurs by necessity and entrepreneurs by opportunity entrepreneurs or necessity entrepreneurs. And you can see differences in the mindset, of course, and the reasons behind that. But also we can see the grit, the perseverance, the passion they can have, of course, the hard work. But here we take entrepreneurial mindset more broadly, and we call it entrepreneurial spirit. Entrepreneurial spirit, and by that we mean that we want to instill in every student, every entrepreneur, this mindset, which has to do with identifying opportunities, with getting access to resources or resourceful, and innovation, of course, this tolerance to failure and resilience, and how to manage risk and uncertainty. And we think that if we develop this and in this entrepreneurial spirit mindset, is helpful for anyone, not only entrepreneurs who are creating new companies or new ventures, but also for entrepreneurs, people on the social sector, NGOs, and they can identify these opportunities and create value. That is what we take as a mindset. But we try to instill that in every program and in every academic program as well.
Can I also just interject before you do? One of the things I think we also need to be able to introduce to entrepreneurs as they go forward, it's essentially alternative forms of financing, but not beyond your traditional bank, your government grant, whatever, because I think the dynamic nature of financial markets in this case will allow for opportunities to raise capital even outside of what has traditionally been done. And I think that is a conversation we need to have as well.
Trisha, could you take us one step further? I'm very interested in this topic, but I want to know where you were thinking. Is it rich, crypto folks who have a bunch of extra capital to spare? What are you talking about?
No, I think even as companies get ready to come to market and to bring products to market, I think you're able to engage, let's say, maybe somebody that would have been a mentor as to buying into your company, whether shareholding, whether opportunities to own the specific assets or have first rights of refusal. I think given the nature of international finance as it is right now, you are able to tailor different models, whether through capital funds, drawdown financing, that kind of thing, that allows persons to come alongside with you and still be able to mentor you, partner with you, and have the option to invest further or even to withdraw from the consideration, depending on how the thing goes, especially now with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
COVID proved to us that your money can only take you so far.
Exactly. Okay. Those are good thoughts for us to close out on. This notion of, again, how do we shape the minds of entrepreneurs and our communities and our cultures to be more resilient in the face of challenges and to continue to build entrepreneurship in these communities. With that being said, I want to give everyone an opportunity to give maybe a minute of just taking us out on a high note. What would you like to leave us with? What message and where we might find you and the work you do? So, Raphael, would you like to start us off?
So I would like to say that entrepreneurship is now everywhere. Should be anywhere. It should be in the curriculum, in education since the beginning. I mean, since the very early years, because we are living in a very uncertain, volatile world, and we need to create new ways of growing the economy, protecting the environment, and giving people the access and the opportunities and rights everyone's deserves. So I think entrepreneurship is one tool that should be there, and we should instill and teach them and in the education system, also working with the government and the private sector.
Beautiful. Thank you, Raphael. Tricia, take it away.
Okay, so I would tell anybody your idea has worth. You just need to ensure that you protect your intellectual property in terms of how you present the idea. And there's always going to be opportunities once you are willing to shop, once you're willing to listen, once you're willing to refine it, and there are agencies that are willing to work with you. Don't ever give up on what your idea is. Just know that it has worth. So you can find us on Facebook. The easiest thing is Strategic Business Support and Development. Or some people just type in BDU, Bravo Delta University, BDU Tobago. It will come up. You can send us a message. You have all our WhatsApp numbers there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Trisha Beckles. I'm the easiest person to find. So all the best to everybody.
Thank you, Tricia. Katarina.
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurship and our entrepreneurs are what are going to move our economy forward and, make Puerto Rico a better place. So what I tell entrepreneurs is that they're not alone, that we have support for them in every level in our organization and other organizations on the island. You can find Grupo Guayacan in our website, guayacan.org, or in Facebook, Grupo Guayacan. And, you have to keep going and you have to innovate. Just do it, like Nike says.
All right, y'all. So the thing about entrepreneurs is that they are literally magicians. They take ideas in their heads that can capture the hearts and minds of the people around them. These people are customers who pay them money. These people are investors who fund them. These people are their friends and family who can receive benefits by having a family member of theirs who's an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are magicians, and we need magic in rough and tough times. This is a time where, again, there is no shortage of challenges facing us as a society, as a species, as a race. So entrepreneurs are the answer to that. We here, the four of us here, we're all in organizations that try to push this forward. So we appreciate you hearing our ideas about this. This is something we're all invested in. They've all given you contact information. Just Google me, Cam Hauser. You can find the organizations I'm involved in. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, so you can hit me up there. But we appreciate your time and energy as all of us talk and continue to think about how we can be better at the work we do supporting entrepreneurs in our community. So I'd like to give a big shout out to all these wonderful panelists, Katarina, Tricia, and Raphael, for being delightful contributors to this. And it's been a joy. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cam.
Thank you.
Everybody's
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best to everyone.
All right. Thank you, WF Caribbean.